Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist. And if you're somebody who is trying to change your behavior around food and you're struggling to do it, hopefully this video is going to be helpful for you. The problem I see is so many people are focused on what is the behavior I want to change? What are the choices I need to start making? And what's not happening is taking a step and looking behind that and considering, what are the belief systems I have? What are the feelings that I have about these things that are influencing my choices? Many of us are going through our lives and we're not even aware of what we're thinking. We're not even aware of what we're feeling. And as Carl Jung once famously said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. As a therapist who has struggled with this stuff and works with people every day around healing their relationship with food, I've come up with 5 psychological blocks that people face when they are trying to get a different outcome in the way that they are eating. I am not a pro-diet person. I think diets are incredibly problematic, and I understand that a lot of people do want to change the way that they eat and they feel like the way they're eating isn't serving them. I want to share these blocks with you because hopefully if you see yourself in them, it will help to increase your self-awareness, and I'll share a few thoughts about what you might do if you think any of these apply to you. Psychological block number 1 is anticipation and expectations. There was a study in 2011 that I feel like we all should be talking about. It's sometimes referred to as the milkshake study, and it's about milkshakes and ghrelin. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone that is produced in the stomach and in the intestines. And when we are anticipating we're about to eat or we are hungry, our ghrelin levels rise, we eat, and our ghrelin levels come down. How high the ghrelin goes up and down is dependent on how hungry we are and how much we've eaten. Or is it? What the experiment found when participants were given milkshakes, and in different groups they were told how many calories were in the milkshakes, and actually everybody had the same calorie milkshake. So the milkshake was about 340 calories. Some people thought it was lower calorie, some people thought it was higher calorie. Their bloods were drawn and ghrelin was measured in their blood. What they found was their ghrelin levels corresponded with how much they thought they had consumed, not how much they had actually consumed. I have a whole video where I go into this experiment a bit more, and I will pop the details for that video below. This experiment makes me think about those moments where perhaps if you're someone who struggles with binging and you go into a supermarket and you're buying a load of food and you know it feels like you've already gone over the edge. It feels like it's inevitable, even before you've started eating. If you're someone who binges, like, you know this feeling. You know the mind has decided it's happening and it's very hard to stop. What if one of the reasons why it's hard to stop is because once the mind has started anticipating it's going to eat a lot of food, that your ghrelin levels are going even higher than they would have otherwise. So while we call ghrelin the hunger hormone, and it does go up when we're hungry, it also fluctuates based on what we are thinking about food. So this is why what we are anticipating has such an influence on what your choice is then going to end up being. The other place we see this show up is, let's say you're saying to yourself, okay, on Monday, I am changing the way I eat. Maybe you're starting a restrictive diet, but maybe you're just going to make some, what you think of as healthy changes. If you've got this start date on Monday, what happens on Saturday and Sunday? Well, on Saturday and Sunday, you're going to eat all the foods that you are anticipating you're not going to have. So in effect, you will eat more on that Saturday and Sunday based on what you're expecting to happen on the Monday than you would on another weekend when you weren't planning on that. They call this last supper eating. It's this idea of once you start saying to yourself, diet starts tomorrow or diet starts on Monday, you end up eating more. So that anticipation of restriction can trigger overeating. You don't even have to actually do the restricting. And this is why we need to talk about this psychological block. The second psychological block I come across a lot is what I'm calling the desperation effect. One of my tutors during my therapy training used to always say, desperation does not equal motivation. How does that make sense? I wonder how many of you are believing that the reason why you haven't changed the way you eat is because you don't want it enough. Or maybe other people have said that to you, you don't want it enough. But here's the kicker. When we pass a certain point of desperation for something to happen, we make it less likely. Take the friend who is perpetually single and desperate to be in a relationship. and you're watching their behavior and you're seeing how they are chasing potential partners away because of their desperation. Or take a parent who is desperate to keep their child safe. All parents want to keep their children safe, of course they do. But if it comes from that place of fear and desperation, you're going to try and coddle your kids. You're going to try and wrap them up in cotton wool and make them scared of the world as well, so that they don't take risks. So the outcome of that is you will actually make them less safe in the world because they're not allowed to go out and make their own mistakes. This psychological phenomena is almost, it feels like a bit of a cruel paradox, and it's often spoken about in philosophy in terms of the law of reversed effort. So the idea being that yes, this is something that we want, but when you're desperate for it to happen, the drive to change is coming from a place of fear. It's coming from a place of fear because the alternative of not getting what you want seems unthinkable. And this is why I and some other people, we talk about this idea of acceptance, self-acceptance, body acceptance. It doesn't mean that you never want to make any changes to yourself. It doesn't mean you don't want to change your body or the way that you're eating. But what it means is that if it doesn't happen, the world hasn't ended. It is being willing to still live the best life you can, even though you haven't been able to make these changes yet. Because the desperation puts all the energy into the problem, and it makes the problem worse. Now with this one, this idea of it, you can be so desperate to change and it doesn't seem to be enough, really confuses a certain subset of people who sometimes comment on my videos. And this brings me on to the psychological block number 3. And the block is inner conflict. So I roughly divide people into 2 categories here. We've got the rational behaviorists and we've got the emotional overthinkers. Now the rational behaviorists, they will hear a piece of nutrition advice and they'll think, that just makes sense. I'm going to start doing that, or I'm going to stop doing that. And they just change their behavior. These are the people who will comment on my videos and go, it's not that hard to stop eating. You just stop eating. Because they're rational behaviorists. They are able to go straight to behavior. And I think one of the reasons why they're able to do this is because they are not conflicted about it. Those of us who consider ourselves the more emotional thinkers, we may desperately want to make these changes, but part of us feels resistance to them. So what happens, we get frustrated with the fact that part of us is resisting them and we really want to do this thing, that we just end up battling with ourselves and feeling really awful about ourselves in the process. So this can look like, I really want to follow a particular eating plan because I think I will feel better and I want to lose weight. And then another part of you saying, yeah, but I want to be free to eat these other foods and I want to feel like I can make choices. I don't want to feel trapped by the rules. So when you have different parts of you in conflict, it's really important to listen to all parts. We try to shut down the part that we want to get rid of. We don't want to listen to the voice who's going, I don't want to do this, because we're saying, I don't want to hear you. We need to figure out how to do this. So let's not listen to the voice that's saying they don't want to do it. So we push it out of our consciousness, but it's still there. It's still there influencing your behavior and influencing your choices. So the solution is to be able to listen to different parts of yourself and ideally try to come to some kind of compromise. This is frustrating. We don't want to compromise. We want this part to win. We can do that, but the battle is just going to go on and on and on. There is part of me that's like, I only want to eat these types of foods and I want to eat super healthy. And then there's part of me that just seems out of control and just wants to eat everything. How do you reconcile those two opposites? What I used to do was come in the middle and go, okay, I say used to, I still do this, and say, I can eat whatever I want. The only condition I'm putting on myself is that I do my utmost to enjoy it and experience it. Because I noticed when I was paying attention to my parts, I noticed that when the out of control part was active, I was just going unconscious with food. So I wasn't even enjoying it. It was this mindless numbing out. So my intention about enjoying the food was about, I am not going to let myself go unconscious with food, but I am going to let myself eat whatever I want. And I'm also going to do my utmost to enjoy it, because if I'm trying to enjoy my food, I'm going to eat in a calmer state. When I eat in a calmer state, it's much easier to hit a point of satisfaction. Compromise can be if you notice that every time you are focusing on weight loss, your eating gets even more out of control. The compromise might be, okay, I am not going to focus on weight loss for a while. I'm going to change my focus to trying to just feel more regulated with food. This is one of the hardest psychological blocks because it involves giving a bit of ground on both sides. And if we're very black and white in our thinking, it's a lot harder to do that. The fourth and final psychological block, this one goes deep, and it is that so many of us, me included, we struggle to be in our own minds. And if we are trying to change the way we think and feel about something, to live in a perpetual state of distraction may not be serving us. There are people out there who sound incredibly wise and knowledgeable because of all the books they've read and all the podcasts that they've listened to, so they can hash all these different nuggets of wisdom here and there. But wisdom really comes from experience. And if we're always distracted, I sometimes call it like binging on knowledge and information, if we're always doing that, we don't get to hear ourselves, we don't get more in touch with ourselves, which is what we need when we're trying to make fundamental change to our behavior. We live in a world of distraction everywhere, from our phones to our TVs. But this is not a new problem. Blaise Pascal, a French philosopher, back in 1654, I think it was, he said all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. This was 370 years ago. So this is not a new problem. I think that this is something much deeper about the condition of being a human being. The problem is now we live in an age where we can distract ourselves anytime we want. Now, I'm not saying you need to go all black and white with this and shut off all distractions, but carving out a bit of time just to be in your own mind, to practice that. It's almost a skill that needs to be developed if it's one you don't have. And I think one of the most straightforward ways to do this, if you're able, is to go out for a short walk and just listen to your thoughts be in your mind. If you are someone who has become afraid of being in your own mind, you're always going to look for ways to get out of it. And if food has become one of those ways, it's going to be very hard to change that without developing this skill to some capacity. Otherwise, the food has to be replaced with something else, which is fine if you find something else that you want to replace it with. But a lot of the time, whatever you replace it with comes with its own problems, or many people find anything they try to replace it with just doesn't work as well as food. If we can become more comfortable being with ourselves, the urge to use food to escape that and to escape our feelings diminishes, and that leads to different choices. Trying to remove psychological blocks is not a quick overnight thing. This is one of the reasons why behavior change, just focusing on behavior, is much more appealing, because you can just start changing your behavior immediately, right? So sometimes to change our minds and the way we feel needs some kind of support network. I do have a community, part of my podcast. I'll pop that in the chat below. I'm also going to be doing a couple of live events in the UK in May 2024. So especially if you are near Brighton, we're doing an evening event in Brighton. My podcast is teaming up with Marcus Kane's podcast, Strong Not Starving. We're going to do an evening of talks in Brighton. We're going to do a day retreat on Bournemouth Beach. And so if you want to come and meet me and connect and pick my brains, it would be great for you to come along to one of those events. I'll put the details below. I appreciate many of you are not even in the UK, but I gotta crowbar it into my videos to let people know about it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next video.